Well, good morning, everyone. This is Penny Poley from Wisconsin Land and Water, and I am the Conservation Training and Membership Services Manager at Wisconsin Land and Water. And welcome to the How Do You Get Started Restoring Your Cold Water Streams in Your County? And today our presenter is Jeff Hastings, and some of you may know him when he worked for the Land Conservation Department, and now he's been working with Trout Unlimited for quite a few years. I think that's about it. So just keep yourself muted, send in your questions, and let's see what Jeff has to tell us today.
Okay, thanks, Penny. I'm Jeff Hastings. Currently work as a project manager in the Driftless area, the map there you see on the screen, for Trout Unlimited. Have been working for them about 12 years. My whole emphasis of my job is to try to accelerate stream restoration work in that entire Driftless area. Prior to working with Trout Unlimited, years in Vernon County conservationist doing stream restoration projects in Vernon County. So it was a nice transition to come work for Trout Unlimited and do what I was doing in Vernon County, only on a larger scale. This morning I thought I would talk obviously about maybe possibly county project in your. I know these field offices are busy. You've got lots of projects you're currently working on. You've got a lot of practices to choose from for EQIP, but I'm hoping to get you excited about adding stream restoration as one of the projects that you take up in your field office. So here's I just want to talk a little bit Vernon County, the Driftless area here, why we do projects over here. What motivates us, what benefits we see for doing stream restoration. But we've got over 600 cold water streams, over 4,000 miles of cold water, and we've got a lot of public access. So that's probably an old slide. I think we probably have more than 1,400 miles now of public access. If you're a county field office, you probably know that this area is the home area of the Coon Creek watershed, where the Natural Resources Conservation Service got its start. And so some of these pictures are those historical pictures from the Coon Creek watershed. But our streams really suffered back from the 1850s into the 1930s significantly from a loss of soil from the ridge tops. Hit the wrong button there. And so pre-settlement, you see that schematic. You see that our streams were quite narrow, deep. The brook trout, that picture in the upper left, is was a native fish in the Driftless area and was thriving and doing quite well. After settlement, 1930s or so, we had that cultural sediment was deposited on the valley floor. Streams became really wide and shallow, and highly eroding banks, and kind of what we see today on a lot of our streams where we have it restored. The German brown trout was introduced. It's more tolerant of warm weather and other conditions, but it thrives and does real well in our Driftless, and we have a lot of wild brown trout. So who are the groups that are doing projects throughout the state? Your county field offices, NRCS, and county field staff. We have, in the Driftless here, we have 3 fish habitat crews, one in Eau Claire, La Crosse, and Madison. They have large equipment and operate those large equipment to put in projects. We have our chapters that often partner with these different groups. And we do have individual landowners that will take on a project once in a while. But I'll be upfront and say it's an expensive practice, costing anywhere from $15 to $25 a linear foot when you're working on an eroding bank. People do stream restoration for a number. I call it stream restoration, but we have a landowner come in the field office. Usually, it's a bank erosion problem that they're wanting to address. Again, when I worked for the Land Conservation Department, the non-point priority program was going on, we did inventories of all in our watersheds, complete inventories, looking at crop fields, gully erosion, stream bank erosion. And we were finding that as much as 85% of the erosion getting into the stream was coming right off the banks. So stream bank protection had to be part of that program if we were going to be successful in improving our water quality in our streams. I took this picture a couple years ago. It actually is over on Rush Creek in Minnesota. Notice in the upper left there that post with the white on top and this shrub here. I took it obviously because of the fence was hanging over. This was a project we were going to work on the following spring, and I came back the next spring, and in just one event, that fence had gone from the outside bank to the inside bank. There's that post with the white and the shrub over here. I estimated that was like 300 and some foot bank, over 12 foot high. I estimated that in just that one event, over 3,000 cubic yards were lost into that stream. If you think of a dump truck as 12 yards, that's a lot of dump trucks backing up and dumping directly right into the stream. So a highly eroded spot. We came back and stabilized it by sloping it and rocking the toe and getting a good vegetation established. And I think, probably anybody that's been knocking on your door for a stream restoration project, this is probably what they're thinking about for stream restoration, of stabilizing that bank and rock. We cover our rock with soil, get a good vegetation going on. It's better for the fisheries. Actually, debris flows a lot easier across the rock or across the soil than it would rock, instead of getting hung up. Right now, I'm on a committee through the Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association, and we're looking at the 580 standard, stream bank stabilization. We've had some unbelievable floods in the last 5-10 years, and we're wondering if we're using the best tools and the best technology to address that. So we're looking at the 580 standard and also the 395, which is the habitat standard, and hope to have some results by January. Managed grazing works well with our stream projects. The project on the right-hand side actually wasn't a restoration project. It was just a result of many years of managed grazing on that stream corridor. We in the Driftless, the trees, especially the shallow-rooted trees, are not of importance to us. In fact, that's where we see most of the erosion. The trees shade out the grasses, and only the broadleaves come up, and so they're very susceptible to erosion. Plus the box elder trees, which are most of the trees that we take out, are really shallow rooted and tend to fall in and cause a lot of erosion. So managed grazing in the Driftless works quite well. Some of our streams actually get colder as you go down the stream when more and more springs enter into the stream. So using the livestock to keep the trees out and establish that sod works quite well. This is just a picture before we did the project. We've come in over here and removed a lot of the box elder trees. This landowner had a fair number of walnuts that he was growing, and so we left the walnuts in and the hardwood trees. We come back in here and we shape the banks, reseed it. There's actually a shallow wetland area over here that we created for non-game. And the limiting factor for trout in the Driftless area is overhead cover for adult trout. So we use a wooden structure referred to as a lunker structure. And lunker is an acronym for Little Underwater Neighborhood Keepers Encompassing Rheotactic Salmonids. And we place these lunker structures typically where you have good flow, directed flow water coming underneath that bank to keep it flushed out. And by just providing this one habitat, the stabilizing the banks and creating overhead cover, we can get almost a 10-fold increase in our trout population. So if we had 3,000 or 300 fish per mile before the project, it wouldn't be uncommon in 3 to 4 years that we would see that capacity of that stream go up to as many as 3,000 fish per mile. We use a variety of habitat structures when we're working with fish. The brook trout streams, we tend to not use the lunker structures, the overhead cover. They tend to favor the brown trout and will often outcompete the brook trout. So if we have a brook trout stream, we'll tend to use a lot of rock, like the large cover rock in the upper left-hand corner. We'll create pools like you see in the lower left. Actually, I think the upper right lunker structure was faced with a wood log. That's one of Bob McKeel's projects up in Monroe. And the stream project down in the lower right, using the large root wads, that's Joe Schmelz project. I'm not sure if, I think that's when I think Joe works in Grant County now as the DC, but this may have been when he was working with Iowa County. We like the use of the rod structures, like in the lower right. It'll deepen the thalweg and make a nice deep stream through in between those root wads, and eventually the sediment will settle out behind those root wads, deepening that stream and making it a nice trout water habitat. I mentioned the Vortex Weirs. This is a way to create a deep pool in the stream. If you get a straight stretch of stream and it's kind of dead water, the water will come at a right angle like those arrows show and overfall and scour out a nice deep pool. And so you can create overhead cover for trout by using the lunker structures and sometimes the root wads, or you can create these deep pools using these Vortex Weirs. We don't often use the log structures, just more labor intensive, but we do use the Vortex Weirs. Properly put in, like the lower left one structure there, they can actually be like a riffle. They won't back up water and do a great job of providing those deep pools. As I mentioned earlier, we're seeing some really promising results from our restoration work. The DNR fish habitat crews shock these streams often before we start a project and after we start a project, and we can see that that 5 to 10-fold increase capacity in these streams. Another reason you might get into stream restoration in your county is just for the local economy. When I worked in Vernon County 20 years ago, we did a lot of habitat work. The county did a lot of habitat work. The DNR did a lot of habitat work. And we had a couple conservation groups that did habitat work. And so we had, in a matter of years, we had many miles of east public access and improved projects. And it wasn't long before we started seeing the tourism picking up. We saw bed and breakfast increase. The hotels definitely did a good job of attracting the trout anglers. And there was a number of surveys done in Vernon County. I think the first one was done in the 80s by an extension agent, and he was showing it was like $600 and some thousand. Several years later, it was over $1 million. We wanted to try to capture what the economic impact was for the entire Driftless. So in 2016, we contracted with the University of La Crosse Economics Committee, economics class, and they did a Driftless-wide economic impact and found it to be over $1 billion on an annual basis. It support over 6,500 jobs, and they also did some surveys for us too. We wanted to know whether we had enough streams that were improved, that people were satisfied and had a great angling experience, and we had a 92% satisfaction. And like I said, at the time, we had 1,200 miles of public access. Now I think it's closer to 1,400 or 1,500 miles. So definitely an economic impact to Vernon County and the Driftless as a whole. I know that when we were getting into doing more stream restoration, our county board was excited about the economic impact and was more than enthusiastic and wanted us to continue to do more projects in Vernon County. Here's just a couple of the typical Driftless trout you might find in our streams. Actually, those are all Driftless trout, big German brown trout. Maybe not typical, but definitely a Driftless trout. Maybe while you're looking at this, I'll stop and ask if there's any questions out there of what I've covered so far. Penny, do we have any questions in the box?
No one's sent in any yet.
Okay.
So I guess yes, people send in your questions anytime, and Jeff will be stopping at times throughout his presentation and taking questions. So why don't you continue on, I guess.
Okay,
Awesome
will do. Yeah. None of those are anything I've ever caught, but I know they're there. One of the reasons that we've seen counties and field offices get more into the restoration work in the last few years is because of the new phosphorus, not new phosphorus requirements of municipalities, but a requirement that the municipalities reduce their phosphorus inputs even more so. And one of the ways that they can do that is to either update their treatment plants so they can remove more phosphorus from their outputs, or they can work with landowners to do practices that capture phosphorus and trap phosphorus. And one of the practices that does an excellent job of trapping phosphorus is stream bank stabilization. Actually, this is another one of Joe Schmelz picture from Iowa County, and it shows after a flood event. And it shows not only that we've stabilized the banks here and made that connection between the stream and the floodplain, but this was just after a flooding event. And you can actually see that and I don't think this is anything we've ever taken credit for, but not only does the bank stabilize now and trap that phosphorus, but you can also see sediment in the tall grass when it came up and slowed out and spread out. A lot of sediment was dropped, so it was also trapping the soil, which the phosphorus is attached to in this picture. So we see a number of counties in the last 2 years. I know La Crosse County, Grant County, Buffalo County, I'm sure Dane County have done a number of projects working with municipalities and landowners to reduce phosphorus by doing stream bank stabilization projects. Monroe County's got a great program. Bob McKeel's been working with us for a number of years, and the way they do it is that they have a landowner sign up for the Farm Bill program, EQIP, and that typically covers anywhere from 50 to 75% of the project, and then they have the municipality cover the landowner share. So really the landowner gets projected for 100%. And then I think in Monroe County, the municipality maintains that practice. So a great way to get a stream restoration project done, works for the landowner, works for the municipality. And the way it's set up with the Department of Natural Resources, I wish I could take credit for this, but if you put in habitat into your project, trout habitat or non-game habitat into your project, you get even more phosphorus credit. So a strong incentive to do stream restorations and put habitat in that. I know with at least Bob McKeel's program, they also get a public access and easement. So you're doing water quality, you're tying up phosphorus, you're increasing the fish population, you're helping the local economy. It's doing a multiple number of practices. Now, this is one area where I thought that might be, if I were back in Vernon County, I might try to work with the municipality to help pay for staff. To get these credits, often you have to hire a private consultant to develop this plan and show how much phosphorus is going to be tied up by that practice. So the municipality is typically paying a private consultant maybe as much as $10,000 to develop a plan per landowner. I think that would be a perfect thing for a county land conservation department to get involved with. And instead of that money going to the private consultant, go to the landowner. I'd have to check with Matt, but I know La Crosse was actually working on getting a full-time employee on that would help do just that kind of a work. So another opportunity. And one of the other things that we're talking about besides fish habitat is non-game habitat. Folks do stream restoration projects for a variety of reasons. And about 20 years ago, I was working with a landowner, and he said, I like your bank stabilization and I like your trout habitat. He said, but what can you do for the non-game population out there? And I really didn't know. I wasn't a herpetologist, but I worked with Bob Hay, who's our state herpetologist for the DNR at the time. And we created a number of habitat designs. We had a great committee made up of conservationists and herpetologists, and we would walk projects, and we would come up with designs that we thought would help with critical elements of habitat for a variety of different species. And probably one of the best things that we came up with was that we put these habitat practices on an NRCS format, made standard designs available. This one happens to be a Hibernacula, which is overwintering habitat for turtles, not on the upper cold water springs, but in the lower cool water streams. You will have turtles that will use these areas over winter. Turtles don't have gills, but they're able to trap water or trap air for as much as 3 months out of the year, and spend that time underwater in areas where silt has accumulated. Maybe you recognize that guy right there. He's Tony Pillow. He used to work for, I think, Iowa County. So here's a picture of Joe Schmelz putting in one of these Hibernaculas. We made the Hibernacula out of rough oak wood, the same material that we made our lunker structures. And so if we had a lunker building day, we would build some of these habitat structures for turtles. We soon realized that wood floats, and we had to add that large rock on top of that structure so it would sink. But these areas, we put these areas in areas that they actually will fill up with silt, and that's where the turtles will overwinter in. One of the things that talking to Bob Hay on walking a project, and we showed him the Hibernacula that we put in, and he said, yeah, that's a great place and good location, and it probably will attract turtles. But he said if that's the only Hibernacula spot in this whole stretch, and there's a disease outbreak, then what you've done is congregated all the turtles into one spot. So we needed to put more habitat structures in. So the non-game habitat guide is available. I've got a PDF that I'm always willing to share, and some hard copies. And I'm always encouraging folks that are doing stream restoration to work with their local biologists to see what other critters are in that riparian corridor, and try to maybe help meet their limiting critical needs. We also add a lot of pollinator plants now to our seedings. In fact, in the Driftless, if you're doing a stream restoration project, I have additional pollinator seeds free to give to you for your project. So we're always trying to make our projects more diverse and benefit more species than just trout. This happens to be one more schematic that Bob Hay did. I've got a young son, and if he knew we were trying to increase the amount of snakes in the riparian corridor, he probably would stop fishing. But this is not for rattlesnakes. It's for bull snakes and garter snakes, milk snakes, and water snakes. And so I didn't realize that these snakes spend the winter with over 90% of their body underwater. So this is nothing more than a Hibernacula that will allow the snakes to get down with their body underwater, and then there's some area above where the water doesn't saturate. But we can put one of these Hibernaculas in a stream next to a stream project in a matter of a half hour for less than $1,000. And not uncommon for Bob Hay to say that 300 to 500 garter snakes, as many as 800 snakes could use a Hibernacula like this. Again, not a Hibernacula is everybody's cup of tea, but some people are interested in the non-game aspect. Probably one of the things that has really driven people to work on stream restoration in the last few years are the intensive storms that we've had back as far as 2004 and 2007. These storms have been unbelievable, to say the least. Some of the stream bank stabilization projects that we did back over 30 years ago and have held up just fine have not fared well with these high velocity intensive storms, especially some of these upper reaches in these watersheds. So the committee that I mentioned earlier we're looking at new tools to identify those areas and possibly new practices on how we approach those upper reaches of streams. Field offices. This happens to be the Monroe County Field Office. You probably recognize Bob McKeel and Bryce there. Whenever anybody approaches me or talks to me about even a TU chapter about doing stream restoration work, I always encourage them to work with the local field offices, both county and federal staff. You have access to the federal farm bill dollars, the EQIP dollars that we often use in our projects, and also the expertise and the technical expertise are at least available through your area office. A lot of field offices now have job approval to do stream restoration work. In Vernon County, for example, it's not uncommon for one person to do the design and carry it across the office to another person to sign off on it. If your office does not have job approval for doing stream restoration, someone in the area office would be more than glad to work with you to start working on your job approval. I've always found that county field staff, talk of practices that they're most familiar with. So we often have field days where we're working out in the field with either the DNR crew, like this one happens to be, or a private contractor. And I like to invite these surrounding counties to come out and see how some of these habitat structures are installed. Try to get them excited and motivated to do stream restoration from their own field office in their own county. So we would continue to have these in the Driftless. If it's something you'd be interested in attending, you can always get a hold of me. We always typically we have a fall bus tour also of completed projects. This year I think it's going to be a virtual bus tour, so that would be an easy one for folks to get online and see some of these projects that are going in. We always have the conservationist or the designer of the project available to talk about the project, problems that they had during the project, and things that they like and don't like, and so forth. But I encourage you to try to catch one of our bus tours, our virtual tour this year, and let me know if you're interested in going to a field day. As I mentioned, farm bill dollars, we use a lot of farm bill dollars almost exclusively as the base for our projects. Once we work with that landowner and have them sign up for the farm bill dollars, and I'm talking EQIP dollars, we work to find the landowner's share of the project where we have an easement. I would say that 95% of our projects or better are where we have a public access. So we use EQIP dollars as the base, and then we work with chapters and other funding sources to cover the landowner's share. You're probably familiar with this or understand this, but I had a call actually just last week from a landowner that said, yes, I accepted that EQIP check and then turned it over to you for that project. He said, but now I'm going to have to pay $6,000 on taxes because of the money that I took in from EQIP. And I explained to him that in the 30 years that I've done this, I've never known a landowner to have to pay taxes on a conservation practice. So he was working with a tax person that evidently did not understand this, and I was able to work with that tax person to show that this was money in, money out, that the landowner was not making any money on this project, and that you should not have to pay any taxes on it. So I think that still holds true. NRCS has been instructed not to tell the landowner that they won't have any taxes, but that they should talk to their tax consultant. And that's probably still good advice, but I still would say that this is money in and money out, and the landowner should not have to pay taxes on those EQIP dollars. In the Driftless area, we've gone after some special designated funding because, as you know, EQIP dollars is limited. Each county probably has 100 different ways they could spend their allocation. So I wrote a regional conservation partnership grant about 5 years ago, about a $3 million one for Wisconsin and Minnesota. Went over really well. In fact, Wisconsin spent all their money in the first year. And so about 3 years ago, I went after a larger pot, a little over $9 million for the entire Driftless area. And so we have those designated dollars for stream restoration where we include habitat protection, but must include some element of habitat. So if in the Driftless area, you do have the RCPP dollars available. Outside the Driftless area, you have your regular EQIP dollars that you can tap into for these projects. In fact, Wisconsin tries to spend, and it's a national, not a mandate, but national, they'd like to see the states spend at least 10% of their dollars on habitat, wildlife habitat. And stream restoration definitely would fit into that category. So there are dollars available every year for habitat and stream restoration projects like this. I mentioned we use multiple sources of funding to cover the landowner share. I mean, everything from, I used to have Walmart provide us with dollars. Fish and Wildlife Service has programs, the private lands program. Both in the Driftless and outside the Driftless, we're part of the National Fish Habitat Action Program, and there are dollars through that. I'm the contact for the Driftless. Louise Malden out of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in La Crosse is the contact outside the Driftless for projects. And we use just multiple sources of funds for trying to cover the landowner share of the project. Also mentioned that there are chapters. There are chapters in every county in the state, and they do require that you have an easement, and they will work with you to cover the landowner's share of that trout habitat project if there is an easement in place. There are a number of counties now that have started their own easement program. Buffalo, I think Bob McKeel up in Monroe has probably 80, 90 easements that he's taken. Vernon County has an easement program. Dane County's got a great easement program. But there are a lot of counties that are taking public easements to provide this access for their local anglers. We also use chapters to put in styles. This is like the fence crossing down here, and these are trout habitat structures. The lunkers I talked about earlier. They can help with a number of different things. One of the things that I think we'll see a bit more of a lead role for chapters in the future is maintenance. Once these projects are completed, to come back and maintain these stream sides where you've taken the easement, trying to keep the box elders out and invasives, which are always a problem. So I guess this was my slide to talk about easements. Other than we do have some great examples now of easements. When I was in Vernon County, we took a 20-20 year easement. Hindsight's no pun intended is a 20-20, but I would have gone more now with a perpetual easement. I think all the other programs, Dane County, Buffalo, Monroe, they take perpetual easements, so they don't have to worry about renewing those. And the practices do hold up longer than 20 years, so it only makes sense to have a long-term maintenance agreement and easement on that property. Actually, this is my last slide, and this is just to kind of end on what our projects look like more today. You know, historically they were bank stabilization projects. That's what the landowner wanted. That's what we did is stabilize the bank. But we quickly realized that we were working in trout water, and that we could increase the carrying capacity of that stream immensely by including some overhead cover and some deep pools. So we started working with our local DNR and actually worked with the state NRCS to get lunkers as a funded eligible practice under EQIP, along with those Vortex Weirs that create the deep pools. Then a number of years later, we started adding the non-game habitat. That opened up a wide number of partners to us, people that we hadn't worked with before, like the Nature Conservancy. Other groups were more excited about our projects when we started to make it other than just trout habitat projects. And it also helped us to draw in, and it wasn't the intention, but it also opened up the pool of funding for our projects. That Regional Conservation Partnership Program grant that I spoke about earlier, the $9 million grant was basically talking about non-game habitat into our stream restoration projects, and I'm sure helped us secure those funds. And then with the monarch movement and just butterflies and bees, we are definitely trying to increase the amount of pollinator plants in our plantings. Steve Burchins, our state biologist, recently has been, well, not recently, but has for a number of years been trying to work with a wide variety of plantings that we can use on our riparian areas that will attract bees and butterflies. So that's my last slide. And Penny, if I've got any questions, I'd be more than glad to answer them at this time.
Okay, well, we have one in the chat box, and so people, you can send them in through there, and then we're going to let you unmute yourself after we get this one answered. Matt asked, with regards to fencing projects and stream crossings, have you had any issues with other agencies considering fences as structures in shoreland and or impediments in floodplain?
Impediments in floodplains, yeah. You know, fencing is a real challenge in the riparian area. And so what we've tried to do with the landowners is actually try to get them to back the fencing off the banks, you know, further back, and then use that area between that fence and the stream as a paddock. And that's worked out well. Less maintenance for the landowner, and we've gotten that fence back. Other than that, we do use fencing a lot of times just to eliminate livestock while our seeding gets established. But yeah, fencing continues to be a challenge. We've actually used structures as far as like crossings, you know, like a stream crossing, or not a stream crossing, but putting the fence across the stream. We've actually used structures like this one in this picture here, this Vortex Weir, instead of a fence. Livestock will not cross in a deep pool, and they won't cross where there's large rock like that. So instead of using a fence, we've used structures like that and had some success. But I think fencing in the riparian area is always going to be a challenge, especially when you put it across the stream. But I think legal-wise, I think that's part of the question, was the landowner has the right to put a fence across that stream. But I think they have to make it so. And I think what we've done is where the fence actually makes it, it's a canoeable or stream. We've tried to put some stiles in so that the people can get out and walk around it. So that's a long way of answering that question, but I would be more than glad to talk to that person one-on-one on the phone and maybe answer that question better.
Okay, we have another one. Todd asks, controlling invasive practices like wild parsnip, canary grass, and others?
Yeah, the parsnip, I think we've come up with some sprays, some broadleaf sprays that work on the pollinators. One of the challenges is with any projects on a new seeding is that first 2 or 3 years to maintain and clip it and keep those, especially things like the parsnip from going to seed. So invasives are a challenge, continue to be a challenge. We work with our chapters. A lot of our chapters are doing that kind of work now, trying to maintain that by spraying and mowing. And Reed's canary grass, well, I guess that one I haven't come up with a solution on that. if you've got Reed's canary grass and it's really heavy and thick before the project, it's likely to be a problem after the project. We have tried to use prairie plants for seedings, and we've had very little success because it's a hard area to get something established. You get constant flooding and new sediment sources and seeds. And as you know, for prairies, you need to maintain it. You need to mow it or burn it. And a lot of our projects are with private landowners where that's not going to happen. So we're using cool season grasses with pollinator plants.
Okay, we have another one. How do you determine whether you keep the banks open with grassy vegetation as opposed to shaded with willows, etc.?
Right. Here in the Driftless, I think that for most of us, it's pretty clear that we want to keep it open. Dave Vetrano, our fish biologist for over 30 years, said that the macroinvertebrates, the insects in the streams, are grazers, not shredders, meaning that they feed on vegetation, and to increase the carrying capacity of that stream, you need more food. And so by doing that, we open up the canopy. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our streams actually get colder as more springs enter them as you go further down the stream. Now that said, I mean, there are areas outside the Driftless where it makes a lot of sense to put shading. And I know Steve Burchins, with our state biologist within NRCS, is actually developing a special committee to look at all these different options for knowing what's best for planting this riparian area. So stay tuned. I do think that we will see some shrubs and trees added to some projects, especially outside the Driftless area where we've got lower gradient streams, and it's more important for that cooling effect. But for right now, for the Driftless, we typically just leave the hardwoods, the deep-rooted trees, and take out the shallow-rooted trees.
Okay, that's all the questions currently. Keep on sending them in. Or else, if you want to unmute yourself right now, you can go ahead and do that and ask questions directly verbally.
I would say that the riparian area is going back to this vegetation has always been, for years, has always been a challenge. When CREP was first came on the scene, we had folks planting trees in the riparian areas. Even people that I know that are diehard conservationists tried to make that work, and they really struggled to keep trees in that riparian corridor from, because of the debris, beaver cutting them, just all the things that happen. So that's that flooding area is a very hard area to grow trees. But that said, I know Steve Burchins is dedicated to try to find some shrubs and some other things that we might use to provide shade and stability to those riparian areas. So.
Great. Yeah, Steve Burchins is NRCS, and I'll look up his email address and I'll send that out shortly on the chat box. I also did send out a short survey link for today's presentation. If you could fill out the evaluation, that would be great. Is there anyone else out there that has any questions for Jeff?
And I do have a copy, a PDF copy of that non-game habitat guide I can send you that you can put on the website too, Penny. Otherwise, I'd be more than glad to send it out to anybody that sends me an email. Great.
Yeah, it was great to hear about all the different counties and what they've been doing and the opportunities that are available to them, and some of those great photos that you had in there. So it was really a good presentation. I'm thinking that's it. It said, thanks, Jeff. Fully enjoyed this. And
yeah, if anybody has a question, they can always follow up with me with an email or give me a call. I'd be glad to talk to them.
Great. And that virtual bus tour or any of your tours, I think you usually do let me know. Then I can share them with our membership. That would be great. That's one thing nice about the virtual ones. More people sometimes can attend that normally couldn't. So that would be nice to get out there. Another thank you coming in. And I think that's it. Again, it's recorded. Contact Jeff if you have any questions, or let me know if you have any questions or future presentations. And another good presentation, another thanks. So way to go, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yes, you as well. Take care, everyone.